In this video, I would like to discuss adjusting cost-based pricing. That is, adjusting your cost of materials, labor, and equipment by a multiplier to give you the price you're looking for. If I'm in control, and I'm currently in an estimate, I have just created an estimate. I generally build out an estimate of the same materials, the same type, just a couple different sizes, and maybe different quantity options so that I can see the breakdown between where my pricing is coming out on the unit as well as overall. If I look at this item and look at its parts that are reflected on any given component, we have the banner material, the ink, the labor, and the printer. It is currently, if I scroll to the right, all using a multiplier of 2. Which is basically means my margin is at 50% across the board when you receive the system. In this scenario, it's not necessarily correct for your pricing. It's a way of thinking about it and an easy way to change it based off of multipliers. To change these multipliers, if you go to Setup, Pricing Setup, All Pricing Setup, on the left-hand side, you'll see default cost multipliers. These are the default multipliers for the different types of parts. So my material is being marked up by 2, labor by 2, and equipment by 2, and so forth. I can edit these directly from here by hitting Edit and changing those values. Let's jump back to an estimate and see how we may want to change those values. If I'm looking across the board, if I'm looking at all my pricing and saying everything is a little too high or a little too low, your biggest factor in that would be material. Material, whether you're ordering 10 or 100 of them, is generally the usage is consistent, and therefore that multiplier is going to adjust small orders in the same amount or in the same percentage as large orders. In that scenario, I would just edit this, and I can change that multiplier by either increasing or decreasing it. And now I've increased my price across the board once it's saved. So in this estimate, I've now bumped my price up with that additional multiplier. Now looking at this, again looking at any item, the parts list, it's going to reflect those changes once it has been updated. So if I scroll across, you'll see the banner has been updated to 3. Now if I look at it, and maybe my price on the higher ones and the larger sizes are in line, but the ones that are small orders are still a little high. In that scenario, generally your equipment and your labor both have setup charges, setup times. It takes 15 minutes to load the printer, it takes so much time to load the laminator, etc. Therefore, adjusting a multiplier on equipment or labor are going to affect smaller orders more than they will large orders. And it's drawing this curve between the two is drawing your pricing structure. So if I came in and said, okay, my labor is just 1.5 and my equipment is 1.5. Now looking at this estimate, I have lowered my price more on the smaller orders than you would have the larger orders. Now that's adjusting all of the parts at one time, all the materials, all of the labor, etc. Well, there are certain items, especially in the materials, that will not hold the same multiplier as others. For this matter, banner material, fairly inexpensive. I may be able to get 3 to 5 times multiplier on those inexpensive materials. On a higher, more expensive material, such as a sheet aluminum, I'm not going to be able to get 4 times $130 sheet of aluminum. So in that scenario, you'll need to adjust those on the individual part. If I look at the Adjust Part Information screen, which you should be familiar with, here we have all the parts you've been entering, and they're linked to a default multiplier. That multiplier, again, is whatever's set in this default, but however it can be overwritten just by editing and overwriting that value. in the scenario we were talking about was more on the flat stock side. So in this case, some of my higher dollar aluminums, I may not be able to get that 3 times multiplier. In that case, I may drop it down a bit on those. It's still going to use the defaults on everything else that isn't going to be adjusted, and there may be some need to adjust these independently. Many things, such as equipment and labor, you will probably be able to just default on the store and everything get marked up the same. On materials such as aluminum and more expensive materials, those will probably need to be adjusted down to get into a market value. That concludes the video on updating pricing using cost-based pricing, adjusting the multipliers. If you have any questions, please refer to our other documentation or contact your point person. Thank you.